Testing, testing. Good, how are you?
Ready, Karen? Okay, Cape May City Planning Board is now in session and compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975. Adequate notice this meeting has been provided. Should a member of this board have reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of that act, they shall so state at this time. Before we start, let's put our phones on silent, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Bezaire?
Karen?
Yes, Mr. Bezaire?
Here.
Mr. Jones? Here. Ms. McCorkle?
Here.
Mr. Crowley? Here. Mr. Gorgone?
Here.
Mayor Mullick? Councilmember Yeager?
Here.
Mrs. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Lundholm?
Here.
Mr. Bedussis?
Here.
Mr. Crippen?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have resolution number 7-09-2024, Addis, Inc., 1317 Beach Avenue, 1318 New Jersey Avenue, Block 1146, Lot 6 through 24. Any corrections to the resolution? Any motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gorgone, seconded by Mr. Bedussis. Mr. Gorgone?
Yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Ms. McCorkle?
Yes.
Mr. Bedussis?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezaire?
abstain.
Thank you.
We have resolution 7-09-2024, Cape May Creative Placemaking Plan for Sustainable New Jersey. Craig, if you just want to, we don't really need a whole lot of comment on this, but
So, I think last meeting,
put your microphone.
last meeting, the board members found some inconsistencies with that creative placemaking. That has been updated, and this is not a master plan element or anything like that. This is used by the city to submit to the state for funding. So they're seeking grants, recommendations that are contained in there, it's scored on a point system, so the more things that are in there, the more points the city would get, and the more eligible funding that they can get. So I know that the board found some inconsistencies, but it's more important to get this thing adopted so that the city can utilize it to secure funding than it is to be entirely, I think there were some old things that were in there that hadn't been updated. So at this point, I think it's been updated, and I think the board can endorse that and approve that.
Motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I'm sorry, was that Ms. McCorkle or Mrs. Reed? And who seconded, Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Reed, seconded by Mr. Lundholm. Mr. Gorgone?
Yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. McCorkle?
Yes.
Mr. Paducis?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezier?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we have the minutes from the June 11th meeting for approval. Motion to approve.
Make the motion.
Thank you, Bob.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Gorgon, seconded by Councilmember Yeager. Mr. Gorgon?
Yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Ms. McCorkle?
Yes.
Mr. Paducis?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezier?
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, I need to abstain. I wasn't.
Abstain? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, application, 615 Lafayette Street LLC, Block 1160, Lot 5.01, site plan, preliminary and final, waiver of checklist requirements, variance relief, hardship, and substantial benefits sought. Put your microphones on. Okay, Andrew, yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Catanese here on behalf of the applicant, 615 Lafayette Street LLC, along with its principal owner, Gary Carty, seated to my right, along with our project planner and architect, John Halbruner. You're all familiar with the site. 615 Lafayette Street is the location of Oyster Bay Restaurant, which is an existing 134-seat restaurant with an associated parking lot. Mr. Carty purchased this property in 2022, as we indicated in our application, and at that time, the parking lot was compacted gravel with 35 parking spaces. The parking lot was repaved with the existing 35-space layout retained. Unfortunately, however, Mr. Carty was not aware that a site plan waiver granted by this board in 2012 had approved 28 spaces for the site. So it is apparent that sometime between 2012, when it was before the board last, and Mr. Carty's purchase in 2022, the gravel lot was reconfigured to create those additional 7 parking spaces. That normally is a good thing. However, some of those spaces do not meet the requirements for a parking space, which is 9 by 18 feet. So we're now requesting approval of the current layout, specifically requesting a waiver of the site plan requirement, waiver of site plan review. That site plan review triggered because the parking was reconfigured, as well as 2 variances. One is for the parking space dimensions, because as I indicated, some of the spaces are less than 9 by 18 feet. Number 2 is the requirement for a buffer planting strip around the parking lot, where 5 feet is required and 2.75 feet is proposed. We do note that that was also approved and shown on the plan in 2012, so that's not a new condition, but we've noted it as a variance as well. Importantly, there are no changes to the site other than that parking configuration, no expansion or other change of the building, no increase in seating. It's really a relatively simple application, and for that reason, we'll keep our presentation short. Mr. Carty is here and available should there be a need for questions, but we really just plan direct testimony from Mr. Halbruner. If we can have him sworn and qualified, I'll turn it over to him.
I'll also swear in Mr. Carty, just in case he's asked a question. Just raise your hand, and our board engineer. Do each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
I know Mr. Halbruner has been before this board. We offer him as an expert in planning and engineering.
What a clarification, architecture and engineering.
Gotcha.
Planning comes with either of those,
It does.
but not separate building license.
Excuse me, can you make sure the microphone's on? Maybe bring it closer. We're short with our full board here tonight almost. Thank you.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Halbruner, I'll turn it over to you to start with existing conditions and the changes we're seeking approval for.
Absolutely. The parcel is relatively large, one for the C1 zone. We are in the C1 zoning district. It's 20,208 square feet. The minimum lot size is significantly less than that. It's a through lot. Has frontage on both Lafayette Street and Broad Street. Lafayette Street has about 126 foot of frontage, and Broad Street has about 32.24 feet of frontage. It's developed with a 1-story restaurant and bar that has a total of 134 seats. It's bordered on our west by the Transportation Center, which is also in the C1 zone, and to the east by residential homes that are both in the R3 and the C1 zoning district. The real topic at hand here is going to be traffic and traffic circulation and parking. The circulation is such that it's one way in off Lafayette and exiting onto Broad Street in the rear. This is one of the very few, if not probably the only, commercial property in the C1 zone that provides a level of parking that's anywhere near what the parking demands are. The only parking lot anywhere near the size would be the Acme right across the street. But every other restaurant or commercial establishment in the C1 zone, while they may provide a couple parking spaces, nothing comes close to almost complying with the minimum required.
Elaine's does.
I'm sorry?
Elaine's.
Okay. As Mr. Kennedy mentioned in his opening statement, there's 35 parking spaces present today, and there were 35 spaces when the applicant first took ownership. They're arranged in angled and parallel parking configurations, and the parking requirements for context, being a restaurant, would be one space for every 4 seats. With 134 seats, we would be required by ordinance to provide 34 spaces. 2012 approval granted approval with variances for 28. The other improvements that were granted with that 2012 plan involved an enclosure of the front patio and a rear addition approximately 17 feet by 55 feet. That was all 2012. It's worth reiterating that there are no other physical improvements proposed to the site today other than legalizing the conversion of the gravel parking lot to a paved parking lot and reestablishing the parking striping that was present when the applicant purchased the property with a total of 35 spaces, albeit that 7 spaces more than what the board approved in 2012 at 28. The parking spaces vary in size. We have a chart on the plans that will show you the various sizes. None are conforming. 9 by 18 is the minimum required. I don't think we have one that is actually fully conforming. The aisle widths vary from almost 28 feet down to about 14 feet, which is compliant. And it's interesting that while I'm sitting here acknowledging that the parking spaces themselves are non-compliant, I can tell you from personal experience and from past experience of 12 years with this configuration, it works. I would have a hard time coming to this board with a brand-new application and proposing parking spaces and aisle configurations as this property has. And if you didn't have the strength of 12 years of demonstrated experience that it works, I might have a hard time justifying it. Anecdotally, I've got my in-laws who are older and would be very quick to complain with traffic and parking, who frequent Oyster Bay both before the paving and after the paving. And at a dinner with them one evening, I casually mentioned, "Have you been to Oyster Bay recently?" And they said, "Oh yeah, the parking's so much better now." Unprompted. Totally unprompted. So
Hearsay.
as an anecdotal story that, again, I would have difficulty coming here with a brand-new application saying, these parking spaces are good, you should do this, you should approve this. But it works, it has worked, and for those reasons, I think it should continue to work. The alternative is make the parking spaces conform and lose a significant number of spaces, and no one benefits from that. The landscape buffer, which is one of the variances that we're seeking, which is required by ordinance to be 5 feet when the property abuts a residential use or district. It was approved in 2012 at 2.75 feet, and it still exists there today. Now, the purpose of the buffer is to provide visual screening from the residents from the nuisances may come from headlight glare and unsightliness of parking lots. We have a 6-foot-tall solid fence which runs the entire length of that border. There is also some existing trees. That buffer that exists at 2.75 feet, less than 5, is far more effective than what would be with a 5-foot conforming buffer planted with just shrubs, for example. And again, this is the condition that was not newly created. This condition has existed since at least 2012, and frankly, probably prior to that. The west side of the property is the transportation center, so there is the buffering requirement, and there is the buffer proposed. We're buffering parking from parking on that side. Before I jump into the standards for the variance, are there any questions about the existing or proposed conditions? I think I'd mentioned in passing, but I probably ought to reemphasize. The real change that happened here, we're taking a hard-packed gravel and stone parking lot. paving it. There is no increase in runoff because it's impervious before and after. The parking configuration is what was there before, so we're really here almost on a technical nature. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'd like to question, I think that it is an improvement from the gravel. The angle of cars is now delineated, so people know what to do. What I have a problem with, and I'd like to see some signage at the back of your parking lot, those last couple diagonal parking spaces, they're the undersized ones. And when I have been to your restaurant, you will have a large pickup truck parked in them. Maybe it has an extended bed. It might have the hitch on it for a boat. It sticks way out. Then you might have another oversized car on the other side because they're not following that those spaces should be for compact cars. So if you just put some signage there to no pickup truck parking in those, I think I didn't go there and count, but it might be 4 parking spaces that really need to be careful of the size of the vehicle, because then I couldn't get out.
Perhaps more pointedly, we could add signs that simply say compact cars only.
Yeah, something like that. Very simple.
I planned on doing that once this was done. And also, the other issue we have in those spots is that some people, there's a tree on one side, I believe, and a telephone pole on the other side, and people, they don't pull all the way up.
Got
So
it.
we also wanted to put signs in there, please pull all the way up to the bumpers rather than, but yes, I've unfortunately been in there both with the gravel and now paved, running around the dining room trying to find someone to go move their car, which I agree with you completely, to have those signs up is important.
Very good. Simple fix.
So one of the board members asked me earlier to explain the difference between the 2012 approved site plan, the configuration of parking versus what's the existing and what you guys are proposing to legalize. And in that area where that, I mean, this lot is pie-shaped and it kind of necks down, where those last angled parking spaces are, there were no parking spaces there. They were more parallel type on one side to make sure that there was, the ordinance requirement is a 10-foot wide aisleway. So the plan was designed so that that 10-foot aisleway was effectuated all the way through the entire lot. Where they're proposing those lots, I mean, those extra spaces are those last angled spaces. So that's the difference between what's the 2012 approval versus what they're trying to legalize now. That was my concern too. So you may even want to paint a 10-foot wide sort of aisleway there with arrow in it, and the signage could say, "Do not block aisle," in addition to compact car parking only. That might work, and, you know, at least you have a visual design. This is what the aisleway is supposed to be, and then there are no if your car's hanging over, then you got to boogie and find another spot.
Good idea.
Is that a-
Yeah, no problem.
For anyone who's interested in comparing the two configurations, on the plan that was submitted, the very far right, or detail number 4, shows a photocopy of the 2012 approved configuration.
Yeah, so.
While we're referring to the plan, immediately to that left,
Yep.
drawing number 3 reflects the condition of the property when the applicant first purchased it.
What Mr. Halbruner said about the increase in stormwater coverage going from stone to asphalt, there's no credit for stone in the commercial district. So lot coverage is not being increased going from the stone to paving, and stormwater is not being increased. So,
Okay, any other questions?
All right, we just need to get to our standards. John, we submitted this application under the C1 hardship as well as the broad flexible C standards. The C1 standard kicks in where some exceptional shape, narrowness, shallowness, or unique feature creates hardship for the applicant, in this case with complying with the
Excuse me,
parking space requirements. Is there a hardship here?
Mr. Cadney, could you please speak into the mic? Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, there is the lot really necks or narrows down as you progress towards the rear, which creates a big choking point and really precludes providing conforming parking spaces within that area. And that's, a unique condition affecting this property and the structures that legally exist thereon, which is almost a classic definition of a hardship. When legally existing structures are prevented from complying with the ordinance by virtue of unique characteristics of the lot, then the hardship is in fact created, and that applies here.
Okay, the Flexible C asks whether the application advances the purposes of zoning and whether the benefits substantially outweigh the detriment. Does this application meet that standard as well?
It does. There are several purposes of zoning, your zoning ordinance, and the municipal land use law that are being advanced by the granting of the requested relief. The first is to promote the public health, safety, and welfare, and we're doing that by improving the gravel lot and increasing the number of off-street parking. Another purpose is to promote the free flow of traffic. By providing more off-street parking, we are promoting the free flow of traffic on the public roads. And lastly, to promote the efficient use of land, where we're using more parking within this space. Those are all benefits. The detriments that may result from this granting of this relief are difficulty for patrons maneuvering into and out of parking spaces. That's really what the detriment is. And the benefits I just described significantly outweigh that detriment, particularly when you consider the alternative of making it compliant. The number of parking spaces on this lot goes down dramatically. That does no one any good. It doesn't do the neighborhood good, doesn't do the public good. So the benefits I described, I think, significantly outweigh the detriments. For those reasons, I think those proofs have been satisfied.
And can the variances be granted without substantially impairing the intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance or substantial impairment of the zone plan?
It absolutely can, for the reasons I've already stated.
Thank you. We don't have anything further.
Just a quick question. You designate 2 spaces for handicap?
Correct.
Is that enough?
That satisfies the state statute, yes.
Okay, and then across from the handicap, there's that one little parking space that looks like it's a large car would butt into the driveway. They're not numbered.
No.
See this little space right there? Right here, that one. Could that be designated for compound?
That's partially on concrete, that's why it looks like it's cut off. This is a concrete pad that's part of that.
Right, but if the car's there, if it's a large car, it's going to block the driveway.
Yeah.
It's also the widest part of the driveway. It's also at the largest part of the driveway where you can circumvent that.
Yeah, as you come in, though, you're looking at the butt end of the car that's parked in that spot. I don't know if that's a problem, or make a compact designation.
Or golf cart?
Golf cart.
Those actually first 2 spots is normally where myself and my general manager park, and I drive a Ford F-150. It never sticks out there. It's where Ms. Reed said the issue is down at the bottom of the driveway. If there is a truck my size, for instance, that parks there, it can cause a bottleneck.
This question's for Mr. Hurlish. You said there was 10 feet between, I guess, when cars back out on each other?
The minimum, so your code minimum driveway requirement for one-way traffic is 10 feet wide.
And what does it go down to?
So they're showing 14 feet here, but the parking stall depth is 14 feet on one side and 11 and change on the other. So when the car is sticking out, you start getting into that 10 feet. So that's why you need the compact parking signage, and you probably need to stripe that very neck of that, where it's necked in there, to show a 10-foot wide drive aisle to make sure that it's ensured to be cleared. The big detriment here is not necessarily the traffic maneuvering on site. What you don't want people to do is turn, that being the Broad Street access or egress being blocked, and have people turn around and try and access Lafayette. That's a horrific, dangerous situation if someone tries to come out on Lafayette. The buildings block sight triangles. There's no way you should be trying to get back out onto Lafayette Street. So that's the big detriment. So that's why we would like to see the compact car signage, and we would like to see 10-foot wide aisle through that narrow neck, where it's necked down there, to make sure that that's ensured to be clear and open.
One way in.
One way,
Yeah,
It's one way.
there's-
There's already one-way striping there.
Yeah, and do not enter signage as well.
You know, with the amount of golf carts now in this town that people are using, you might want to put a sign that say designated golf
Golf cart/compact.
cart/compact car, so golf cart doesn't park in a big spot.
Right, in a big spot.
Anybody else have any comments? Craig, you want to go over your?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. This is my report dated June 14th, 2024. This is an application located in the C1 Primary Business District. It is an existing restaurant and bar, and the site plan, there's a site plan preliminary and final approval requested and a waiver of checklist requirements. And that is for the paving of the parking and reconfiguration and additional parking spaces that are existing, but they're trying to legalize it because nothing has ever been approved subsequent to the 2012 Planning Board application. So I'm going to roll right through my completeness review. There were numerous checklist items that they were requesting waivers for due to the nature of this application. We did support all of those, being items number 2, 5, 22, 26, 28, 31, 33, and then we get into the checklist requirements for preliminary site plan, and they fall under item 3, and they turn into letters. Item P, Q, V, W, and X. We support those waivers, and we did recommend deeming the application complete. There is a zoning table on page 4 of 6 in which I reviewed the zoning requirements. The two things that really change here or are being modified are the parking buffer planning strip. That was previously approved. However, they're providing more parking spaces along that buffer strip, so now they've essentially lengthened the nonconformity. It's an existing nonconformity with regards to width, but the length is getting wider, so that's the only issue there. And then you should note, one of the benefits of this application is this is an 134-seat restaurant. There are 34 parking spaces required. 28 are existing legally, based on the 2012. You're now increasing that. They have a surplus of 1. So you go from a non-conforming parking situation to a conforming +1 situation. That's a benefit. With regard,
Craig?
sure.
2 questions. First, is there no employee requirement in the C1? You don't,
There are, and I don't know what the employee count was.
okay. And second, I thought they were asking for a variance on the parking due to the size.
They are, and I was going to get into that,
Sorry, sir.
because I know you like to take great notes, and so that the
Well, no,
revelations...
I'm going to take that
Yeah.
chart, and
Exactly,
I
so,
want to give them all the variances they're asking for.
so they did request a parking stall size variance, because the additional parking spaces that are being added, they're all non-conforming size. The required size is 9 by 18. Section 525-49A, A1 requires 9 by 8 parking spaces. All of the additional spaces are non-conforming with regards to size. They're all undersized. So there's 2 variances, and the second one is from the buffer planning strip we're lengthening the non-conforming width of 2.75, where 5-foot width is required.
The 2.75 was approved in the
In the
previous.
2012, and now they're just bringing that width down along those parking spaces. Okay? So those are 2 variances. I didn't miss any, right, Andrew?
That's it.
Okay, I got those. Okay, under general review comments, so we do a stormwater review. These improvements are not considered major development, therefore they don't have to comply with the additional stormwater management that's required by the code. They do have to comply with ordinance 485-2022, which is the minimum stormwater management and grading requirements. That runs with the life of the project. That means if they're discharging, stormwater that's adversely affecting a neighbor, the city has recourse to come after them and have them provide a stormwater system that manages that. Item number 3 is And I was going to say this wasn't required, but now we have a little bit of improvements that are required, and there's going to be an inspection required, so you're going to have to furnish the required performance guarantee, which will probably be nothing, and the inspection escrow. And then item number 4, we tie the acceptance of those improvements to a satisfactory inspection and issuance of the CO. Item 5 is our standard conditions that they comply with all of the other recommendation reports from the Fire Department, Police Department, Public Works Department, Environmental Commission, and Shade Tree Commission. We did receive those reports. Environmental Commission recommended approval with no conditions dated June 25, 2025. The Fire Department recommended approval with no conditions or notes. That was dated, I think that's a 6/24/24. Police Department recommended approval 6/21/2024 with no comments. Public Works recommended approval dated 6/21/24, no comments. And the Shade Tree Commission recommended approval with the following conditions dated 6/28/24. Please take care to preserve and protect the trees on the east side of the parking lot. I think they may have thought that this was going to be constructed. All those improvements are already in, so I really don't think, I think you guys can comply with that. Okay. Item 6, approvals conditioned on all other state, county, and local approvals. 7, this project is located within the historic district. I don't think these improvements trigger any historic preservation review, but should that be required, you're obviously subject to that. Item 8, you're required to comply with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements. And finally, item number 9, I would just ask Mr. Halbruner to revise his plan to show those aisles and the signage with the compact or golf cart parking, and that would be it.
Okay. Any other comments from board members?
Yeah, I would like to comment. I'm very disappointed by this application, because there's nothing to complain about parking. I feel the need,
Does that mean you're making a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to park this in the approved column.
I know, it's always parking with you, Dan.
Parking, I have a big problem with parking, but I'm disappointed. I have nothing to complain about with this.
It must kill you to have to make that.
I'm going to bite my tongue, but I'll make a motion.
Wait, just to make sure, the motion you're making is a motion for site plan preliminary and final approval, a waiver of checklist requirements as indicated by the engineer on pages 2 and 3 of his report, subject to the conditions that the signage will be added to require compacted golf cart parking only in the last 2 angled spots, and there will also be demarcation to show 10-foot aisle for through traffic, and the 2 variances are buffer planting strip and parking stall size. That's the motion.
That's what I was going to say, but you
Thank
took
you.
the...
I know, I knew you were going to say that.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Crowley motions, Mr. Gargone seconds. Mr. Gargone?
Yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Ms. McCorkle?
Yes.
Mr. Bedusis?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezier?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. Have a great night. Thank you.
Okay, we already did the creative placemaking the discussion, so we have, we've got 2 master plan consistency review ordinances. One is establishment of limitations and regulations for off-street storage of trailers. I'm not sure why it's in front of this board. That's a police matter, and unless I'm wrong, Craig, that's really not something we even have any saying.
Sorry. It was referred to me to do a master plan consistency review. The first thing that I noticed is that it's not part of Chapter 525, which is our zoning code. It's in the section of the city ordinances that allows police to write tickets. It has all the stop streets in there, and it has, parking enforcement and all of those such things. That's the section that's being updated. Now, is the storage of trailers in front yards related to site plan considerations or, master plan related things? That's for you to judge. So you can certainly comment on it, but I don't know that we need to do a consistency review with the master plan because it's not a zoning ordinance. But I'll defer to our attorney if he thinks I'm wrong with that.
I think if they passed it without coming to us, it would be a valid ordinance, but the fact that they referred it to you to determine if there's any impact on the master plan and zoning, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. I mean, because they may do something that we disagree with. They may pass something that's outside zoning that impacts zoning, so I wouldn't like push back and just say, yeah, you know what, they looked at this and it doesn't offend anything we're trying to do with the master plan. There may come a time when they do something that does offend the master plan, that technically they don't do under the zoning ordinance, but they do it in some other section, they outlaw sidewalks or something. And you say, well, it's not technically zoning, but on the other hand, we kind of like sidewalks, it's the free flow of traffic, or some other police power action. So I would examine if it violates the master plan and say, okay.
How does this vary than what's already on the books, than what the current code states? Is there, what's different? None of this has been discussed before?
I don't know, but I think that there probably is a gap as opposed to changing something. They probably just have never addressed the storage of trailers specifically. A lot of towns have those limitations.
Right.
And I know of towns that do.
Right.
Where I grew up does now. Mystic Islands has that now. Limits how long you keep it out front, where you can keep it and all that.
Okay.
And the limit on the number.
The ordinance as presented to us doesn't delete a section, it just inserts this new section.
Okay.
So these are all new controls that are
all
not
new.
there now,
Got it.
is my understanding.
Right.
Well, if that's the case, I have a comment on paragraph F, where it says it shall be unlawful for any person to park, store, keep, maintain at any time on any vacant or unimproved property, any motor vehicles. That is actually in direct conflict with our section of the ordinance that provides for temporary seasonal parking, where people have lots, especially down in the Cove end of town. I know of several of them where they park cars. So, I mean, I think that, I'm not sure if they intended that or not, but, we've got a parking problem in town. I'm not sure why you want to restrict people from being able to rent spaces out in a lot that's been doing it for years. Not only that, as Mike just pointed out, the city just created parking on the lots at Lafayette and St. John Street.
Right.
So I don't know if that's such a great idea, that part of it anyway.
Does this apply to construction trailers also? Because you have a situation where you have a construction trailer parked on the street for 3, 6, 9 months, whatever, while the construction project's going on.
Good point.
Temporary trailers there is a control for temporary trailers in our zoning code.
Okay,
So you can get a zoning permit for a temporary trailer, separate and apart from this.
okay. Thank you.
The other thing, too, is under exceptions, number 2, it says, they'll give you 24 hours, and that's it, as far as if you have a trailer on a lot, not to exceed 24 hours for any storage. I mean, I think that's a little tight.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, maybe 72 hours, or, but, someone comes back from vacation or something, perhaps they've got their trailer or something, and they don't have the opportunity to move it to its permanent location. Giving them 1 day and then getting ticketed, I think's a little tight.
I'm sorry.
Go on. Yes, your question.
I can't find exactly where it was said, but I'm thinking of the house next to you, Bill, that is the duplex. And that house runs from Missouri to Massachusetts. So the front of the house is on Missouri,
Vermont to Massachusetts.
Vermont, excuse me. I don't know the gentleman, but I know he has a boat and he pulls it in and he parks it, it's fine. But according to this, it's not the distance or it's visible. Something in here said that it had to be in the back of the yard and not visible from the street. So how does it affect somebody like that whose backyard is on a street? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Well, here you have two front yards, next door to you.
And there's nothing wrong with him, the way he parks his boat and he keeps his property. It's just doesn't fit. According to this, I'm seeing that he would not be allowed to do that anymore.
And also, even if someone would park just, let's say, a boat trailer, just the trailer itself in their backyard, it says it has to be in a paved area. The backyard's out of sight.
Who put this together, Mike, do you know?
I have no idea. I've always wondered about, actually, I'm surprised even by the fact that it probably doesn't bother a lot of people, but this is suggesting that you can have a 30-foot long trailer, boat or trailer, at the front line of your house. As long as it's, behind, no, not anywhere between the front line of the facade of the house and the street. Right. You can park a 30-foot boat there. And a lot of people do. I mean, I know that happens, but I'm just surprised that if they want to get things under, or, have some kind of rules, that's surprising. I've never seen
Where
it.
did this come from? You know?
It came from the city solicitor.
Okay,
I think it was,
Somebody asked for it.
right.
I thought it was referred by the HPC, because the draft ordinance states the purpose of this ordinance is to address long-term storing, leaving of parking of trailers in the front-facing areas of private property, which creates a detrimental impact to the streetscape and visual environment, and is determined that it is
Right.
appropriate to amend the code to establish limitations and regulations for off-street storage of trailers.
That's what it sounds like.
So I thought that this ordinance, as well as the next one that we're going to discuss, were referred to us from the HPC.
I think you're right. I think, they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, so
Yeah, the proposed standards.
So I think the referrals from the HPC, and that's why they're draft ordinances, they wanted us to look at them and get our thoughts on those before they were sent to the governing body.
Is that true, Karen? Are these coming from the HPC?
Yeah.
He is the solicitor for the HPC as well. So,
I mean, it doesn't matter who the solicitor is. I thought we were giving these things for a master plan review, but if they're coming from the HPC, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily wrong for us to look at them, but they shouldn't come in the form of a ordinance. It would come as like a memo and we just need some clarification on that in the future. I'll talk to Chris about it.
Sounds like this
Uh,
ought to be
Rich,
tossed
I had
to
a-
council.
I had a legal question.
Can I just say one
Maybe
thing?
I'm
Because
misreading
there's really no
that.
point in us getting in the weeds of this if the governing body hasn't even considered it or thought about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that this ought to be pushed to council and let them decide that, well, first of all, I think there's a lot to discuss here, and I can't see them sending back to planning board.
There also
What would
should
be
be an
the reason?
HPC representative here for the reason you just said. Like, we have questions, we got to talk to whoever is, they have a conversation with us about it.
And who directs them to do this sort of thing?
Self-directed.
Yeah, Rich, I had a legal question. Isn't this and the next one, aren't they a bit of an overreach from HPC? In other words, they're recommending ordinances that cover the entire town, even though the entire town isn't subject to the jurisdiction of the HPC.
Thank you. I don't,
Well put.
Thank you, Dennis.
I'm not,
On a roll
I don't
tonight.
call it an overreach, but I do think that they have, I don't want to say legally that the HPC doesn't have some input on what else goes on in town, because things that are adjacent to your historic commission can affect to your historic district can affect the historic district. I mean, if they put an amusement pier just over the line on Grant Street, I mean, how would that affect the HPC, I mean, the historic district? So I think they have some say in it. but they don't
Not to
regulate.
the extent of drafting an ordinance, two ordinances to govern conduct outside of their jurisdiction.
I don't think giving us an ordinance as if it was like being considered by the commission is the best way to go
What's that
about
way?
it. They might want to come in and say, hey, we have some concerns about front-facing garages outside the historic district and how it impacts, and we want to talk to you about that, or, and then, have them explain why they care about that, or trailers. It's not that they're bad ideas, it's just, it needs to be fleshed out, but to just send us an ordinance,
Yeah, it is an ordinance.
doesn't seem.
As a blanket to cover the whole city is a bit much.
We haven't even hit that one yet. So we want to obviously not
There's some valid points.
act on this. We want to send it back. We don't even want to send it to council yet, do we?
No, I don't know that it came from council. That's what was, because I
Oh,
asked
no.
what the ordinance number
No.
was. Usually we get it after first reading, and then I have an ordinance number, and I did a draft resolution without an ordinance number, because I couldn't figure it out. So, well, can I suggest that we send it back to wherever it came from, and just say, we're glad to talk about these things, but we'd like a representative to come and explain
Right.
what it is you care about. Yeah.
And that discussion may lead to language that we could propose in the zoning code that does cover this kind of thing. But that discussion hasn't been made yet. We need to talk more about that.
And what part of town it applies better to, not just everywhere.
Yeah.
Like how would this
every zone.
affect, we were saying,
Right, we're
in
gonna
Village
send-
Green, where you have quads and the driveways are all in the front? How would those people be able to park something of these vehicles, a trailer or a boat? According to this, they wouldn't be able to.
No, that's right.
The-
Well, let's,
I have a,
as Rich said, let's send this back to the originating source.
Was there a
And-
cover letter with it? Let me go back.
You sent it to me by email, yeah.
Who's he?
Sent it to Craig, I think.
There was an email, and they were both together, so I assumed that they were both coming from the HPC. And that might have been a wrong assumption. The second one that we're
Def-
dealing with
Definitely.
says it's from the HPC. The first one was more in ordinance form, so it didn't say.
Yeah, but the language, the whereas language sounds exactly like that's the premise that this was being proposed for, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
We're going to send that back
Both of
from
them?
from whence it came.
Both of them?
I think the second one,
All right.
go ahead.
In fairness to Chris, he did write a cover letter to Karen. I'm going to read it so everyone has the benefit of it. I am attaching two proposed ordinance measures discussed by the HPC at their May 20th meeting. One is the HPC's proposal to extend the concept of screened parking throughout the city through code amendments that require various elements relating to parking garage doors to be screened from public view or situated on a site as to be minimally visible. The HPC discussed two options, A and B, and requested that these be sent to the planning board for master plan consistency review and any general comments prior to presentation to council. It has been council's preference to have the planning board weigh in on any development ordinances initiatives first to avoid ping-ponging between first and second reading, similar to how we handled the artificial turf ordinance. The HPC prefers option A. Is there an option A and B in that?
There's a B,
Yeah, there is.
B's on the last page.
yeah, B's short.
The second is a general parking ordinance relating to storage of trailers, boats, et cetera, on private property. Many towns have regulations for where these types of vehicles can be stored long-term. Currently, the city does not have much in the way of regulations on this issue. The HP endorsed this option. Likewise, they request the planning board's comments on same. So, they, this is at the bottom of a fairly long email chain, so, I think, to the HBC's credit, and Chris Gillen Schwartz is no dummy, he sent these for us to talk about them, but it'd be easier if an HBC person was here, so you could try to hash it out, because now we're gonna
Yeah.
make comments and then go back and get a new one, it'll take, I don't know, 6, 7 years. So maybe we just send this back and say, we're open to talk about it, and I can even put in, I took a couple notes on your concerns were so far. It may conflict with the encouragement of parking on vacant lots where parking is encouraged by the master plan, right, Bill? That was
Yep,
your
yep.
thought? Some properties have 2 front yards, and this doesn't seem to account for that. And I think there was a comment about requiring cement or so.
Yeah, paved surface to store
Paved surface.
trailers
or
on.
a trailer.
Bob brought up.
Do we really want more hard surfaces, you know, in the backyards so people can put boats back there, right? So maybe some of it seems to encourage impervious surface when we actually try to
Don't want
discourage that, right?
Okay, you also might want to make the comment, you didn't like the word overreach, but
I understand what you're going to say, yep, yep. Some doubt whether it can be applied throughout the entire town.
whether it's within the jurisdiction of the HPC,
Right, although I think that they're asking us to consider it, and it's within our jurisdiction, so.
right?
But I'll say something to the effect of, there's concerns about its applicability throughout the town and why the HPC, you know, is focused.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
It sounds like the whole thing sounds like a solution without a defined problem, frankly.
It's going to make the parking problem worse, because
Yeah,
people aren't going to be able to park in their driveways. You have a
Right.
garage door that faces to the side
Yeah,
with a 6-foot setback on the side.
right.
And it said about if you push the vehicle to the back of your property, it has to be paved. Well, a lot of people in the winter just push their boats on the yard.
Right.
Yeah.
Now they have to pave that area, and then that opens another.
Now you're into lot
Lot
coverage
coverage.
issues and
The parking, the garage situation, if you have a house with a garage, you can't have living space above it? That's half of East Cape May.
Especially if we're serious about holding developers and builders to the off-street parking requirements. That's,
And that just, all that does is encourage more paving for driveways, which is nonsensical.
Didn't it say that?
I'm for maximum parking.
Me too.
You've made that quite clear.
So it sounds like we just, Dennis, for your sake, we can just make all the parking spaces smaller in town and we'll get more.
Well, or require everybody to have a golf cart and not a big car. Then you can,
And you can't drive in the rain then.
yes, you can, you do. I-
And you have to register, right, all the special fees that go.
So do you have enough feedback on this garage parking situation?
Yes.
And I don't understand why you can't see a garage from the street. In the end of town where we are, you pull into a garage.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's
want the door
1970s
now,
into
not
2020
across the street.
construction.
I think, and I don't mean this to defend.
I'm sure carriage
the
houses
HPC,
face the street.
But I think the idea is to try to avoid what has happened near my parents in Ocean City and in Cialis City, where every house is just 2 garages, so that when you walk down the street, all you see is 4 pilings and 2 garages, and that is every house, and it's identical for miles. So as much as everybody loves parking, by the way, very few people park in those garages, they're also trying to avoid that appearance. So the houses you're envisioning, which are nice houses with a front door and a bay window and a little garage on the side, I think what they're looking at is as houses get raised, what you get is just 2 garages, and that's your entire streetscape. So there is something to be said about
That's Spicer Creek.
trying to break that up a bit.
We haven't seen that phenomenon.
Is there,
Well, yeah, but because.
If it starts to become.
Because they're not requiring the raising in the historic district, but outside the historic district, everything is starting to go up, and then there's garages in the bottom. So I'm not trying to argue the position, I'm just trying to explain that is what's going on. And a lot of garages aren't used for parking anyway. I mean, we have this fantasy that we say, oh, well, you have a garage, and if you walk by the garages, about 1 in 4 has a car in it, and the rest have beach chairs. So, you know, there is something to be said for
You can't
striking
regulate,
a
you
balance.
can't regulate use. You can regulate the fact that they provide the parking. If it gets bad enough, they're gonna take the junk out of the garage and park in it. But anyway, I'm just
putting,
Well-
there are some
Yes.
places to that as well, so that's all.
Maybe the value of this is that it might encourage a more comprehensive discussion on what we do require for parking, and that is a zoning issue.
And also how those garages are designed. 'Cause I saw this before you guys, well, I saw it a couple weeks ago, and when I was in Ocean City, I started to really look at that. And on smaller streets particularly, it's nice when the garage is pushed back 20 feet or so that there's a parking space, and then the garage starts, so that when you walk down the street, the garage is recessed. So it's just something to just think, Yeah, instead of rejecting it out of hand, I would give some more creative thought to what you see if you go to Ocean City and Sea Isle, which is a garage on the sidewalk, and
Well, their setbacks aren't what we have here either. Their front yard setbacks aren't what, are a lot less than required here. You got
Another,
25-foot front setback, that's a parking space, then you got a garage beyond that. What you're talking about is what we really have now.
and the whole front of the house is driveway, so there's no parking in front of it.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, all those double garages are driveway across the whole front of it. If you limit what your curb cutout can be, who cares if you have 2 driveways? You're not taking up a parking spot out in the street.
That's the CL problem. They've eliminated
Street parking.
casual off-street parking because everything's a driveway.
Yep.
The whole property front is
Yeah.
cut out to be a driveway.
But we're not seeing that here.
Maybe we should make sure that the zoning ordinances are,
Well, it.
Limit your driveway cutout
It has driveway width and you got lot coverage, there's a lot of.
Yeah. I heard someone touch upon it, but like my biggest concern was when you have a front-facing garage, it's the most efficient way to park. The driveway straight into a front-facing garage creates the least amount of lot coverage, allows for the most, open green space on your lot. If you're going to make them turn that sideways, now you have turning movements, more paving, and then you're eliminating a parking space in the front, between the face of the house and the street. So now you're pushing another parking space onto the lot. You're not getting credit for that first 20 feet of driveway as a parking space. You're going to drive lot coverage really high. So there's either going to be a lot of lot coverage variances, or like there need to be a companion study of lot cover, what this is going to do to lot coverage, because it does have impacts.
Plus, you're forcing more street parking.
Well, it's something in here that
That's the
says you
other
can't park between the front yard and the front of the building.
Yeah, so if you,
That's taking the first spot out. Again, it just,
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that either.
no.
And who's enforcing?
There's cars on the street, too. They're blocking
Another
the
question.
architecture.
so are we going to refer both of these things?
I think,
Yes.
Okay. I'll move that.
Send them back.
Send them back.
Need a motion?
I think an HPC person should be here to talk about it.
Do we need a motion? Because I'll make it. I'm getting tired of Rick elbowing me at the baseball game.
so there's a motion on the floor.
Motion.
it's a motion to remand it back to the HPC with a recommendation that the representative here at the next time it's on the agenda, and I have a list of comments that were made and to be considered, which includes, it may conflict with the encouragement of parking on vacant lots when parking is encouraged. Some properties have 2 front yards, seems to encourage impervious coverage to be created in yards, may increase parking problems. Not clear why it includes area behind HPC as to both ordinances, and front-facing garages are most efficient method of parking, and other forms create more lot coverage and more maneuvering.
Like you said, it's not clear what HPC should be involved in
It's
anything
not
outside
clear
this.
why the ordinances include areas beyond HPC as to both ordinances.
Okay.
Beyond, I should say, Historic Center.
District, historic district.
Historic district.
Okay, so that was a motion by Mr. Crowley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Crowley, seconded by Mrs. Reed. Mr. Gorgon?
Yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
yes.
Ms. McCorkle?
Yes.
Mr. Badducis?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezare?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's it for tonight, guys.
Oh, can we do the bills?
Oh, I'm sorry, payment of bills.
Pay the bills.
Yes,
Oh, I did say one thing.
yes.
Okay.
Motion to pay the bills, pardon me? Motion to pay the bills?
I'll make a motion.
Working beneath the structures. Did we?
So I'm sorry, Mr. Lundholm motioned,
Yes.
and who seconded?
I will.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have a motion by Mr. Lundholm, seconded by Councilmember Yeager. Mr. Gorgon?
Yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley? Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Ms. McCorkle?
Yes.
Mr. Badducis?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Bezare?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Final motion?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, all.
Let's go.
Let's go, that's right.
What inning is it?